Hello, I'm David Martin Davies, and I'm welcoming you to another one of our Vital Conversations. These are produced in partnership with the San Antonio Area Foundation. Vital Conversations is a series of community conversations centered on the San Antonio Area Foundation's four impact areas: livable, resilient communities, youth success, successful aging, and cultural vibrancy, which is today's topic. This program is made possible through a collaboration between Texas Public Radio, the John L. Santikos Charitable Foundation, which is a fund of the San Antonio Area Foundation. So today's cultural vibrancy, we're talking about San Antonio, and a city is, what is a city without that culture? San Antonio is fortunate to have an abundance of history and culture and this great heartbeat that rises organically from the population. This is our city. But the pandemic drastically impacted the viability of creative industries and our creative infrastructure and overall cultural vibrancy that's happened here in San Antonio and other cities around the world. So, I mean, this is just not acceptable. We can't have this. We have to come up with strategies in order to compensate for this, particularly when it comes to making sure that art is accessible, and especially when it comes to art and youth education, because if we're worried about what's going to happen in the future to our community, we have to make sure that we have art education. Actually, I'm impressed because this topic, cultural vibrancy and arts and education, hits on all four of the vital topics. Youth success, certainly. You can't really have youth success unless we're doing youth outreach with arts and culture. Livable, resilient communities, you have to have this in order to have resilient and livable, successful aging. Can you imagine going through life's journey and being deprived of what art brings to you and being able to process what your life is all about? And cultural vibrancy, it all folds into one. And so we want to have a conversation today about that and through these perspectives. So let me introduce our panel today. We're joined by Stephanie LaFroscia. She is a Senior Program Officer for the San Antonio Area Foundation. And Stephanie, are you there? Can you hear me?
I am. Thank you.
All right, fantastic. Mari Hernandez is an Education Programs Manager for the Blue Star Contemporary Studios. And Mari, are you there?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And Alexandra Van de Kamp is the Executive Director of Gemini Inc. Alexandra, it's good to have you.
Thanks so much.
And we're also joined by Brandon Henson, the Executive Director of the Youth Orchestras of San Antonio, YOSA. Brandon Henson, welcome to the source. Welcome to our Youth Vibrant conversation. So, Stephanie, at the San Antonio Area Foundation, can you sort of give me an idea of how the impact of COVID, how y'all have seen it hitting this particular area, art education, and why do y'all want to make sure that this is something that is discussed?
Sure. Well, I think we saw it hit immediately with the school closures in the spring. We were certainly aware of it, and when we, with some of our funding partners, pulled together the COVID relief fund in the spring, we were very intentional about including art organizations and highlighting those organizations and reaching out to those organizations who are providing resources to families with school-age children, because we are aware of just the impact of arts education on kids in terms of their ability to connect with a social network, more positive mental health outcomes, and their ability to engage with other activities in school. And so to lose that so quickly was traumatic, on top of all of the other traumas we were seeing in the spring and continue to see. And so we were able to fund 18 organizations, nearly $400,000 just within weeks of the closings, and we're continuing to do that today. The other guests will talk about the work that they're doing and the impact, but we know, we've seen in studies for over a decade, that when kids have rich arts environments in school and at home and in their communities, they are doing better in school, they have higher attendance and better outcomes, higher success in college, and it just keeps going on and on. As you said, this touches on every aspect of our lives and our communities. In terms of our workforce development, in terms of safe and healthy communities, and even lifelong aging. So it really starts with that access to arts that we have in our K through 12 settings.
And we had a system before. We had a great infrastructure. Schools were a great way to deal with this. We had in-person Saturdays, events, and after-school materials. But then here comes a pandemic. Here comes a shutdown. And that's we have to adjust. We have to adapt. We have to find new ways in order to continue our mission. So, Madi Hernandez at Blue Star Contemporary, I wasn't really familiar with what y'all were doing with kids. Always thought of you as, the place to go see this highly sophisticated, cutting edge contemporary art in San Antonio, and all the cool people. It's a cool kids table in San Antonio. And so, and then I went on your website and I saw this abundance of material that you have available and this outreach that y'all do for kids. So can you talk about what y'all did before COVID and then how y'all adjusted?
Sure, of course. And thank you for those compliments. Yes, Blue Star Contemporary is certainly a welcoming place for everybody. So in terms of art education, our programs do look quite different from what they did pre-COVID. We were working with different segments of our community with in-person programs. Our main youth art education programs are a high school after school studio intensive course, in addition to something we call creative classrooms, which makes art accessible to elementary school age students, in addition to having an art education lab where people could come into our galleries and create hands-on activities that extend our exhibition. So all of these things were happening in person. And so we had to make quite an adjustment to COVID, and we've gone virtual. Almost immediately, we reached out to the individuals that we were working with in our community in terms of, the students we were working with, the schools and teachers, administrators we were working with, and tried to get an understanding of where they were and what they needed. And based on their needs, we made some adjustments to our programs. So our after-school program has gone virtual. All of our students are continuing to join. And we're trying to provide some sense of normalcy for them and to continue the core things that they were learning in the studio, such as hands-on activities, exhibitions. They just had their first virtual exhibition in Sacramento, California. They're constantly producing artwork. We've had a handful of winners from Scholastic. Same thing with our Creative Classrooms elementary program. We have gone virtual, where we are providing art instructional videos and art curriculum to the elementary schools. And a positive side effect to that is that we've seen the program expand now, whereas we were putting one artist into a school system. Now we have gone virtual, and videos are much easier to distribute across schools and districts. So that has been a nice side effect of going virtual.
Right. So let me go over to Gemini Inc. Alexandra Van de Kamp. Gemini Inc. is a literary nonprofit, leading literary nonprofit here in San Antonio, helping people capture their stories and write and do it well, and then also be able to bring that to a greater audience. How has this impacted what y'all have done at Gemini Inc.?
Well, we did have some online like the before after answer to that is we had some online programming before COVID for our adult public classes. And actually we're kind of beginning to expand that. That pivoted not seamlessly, but more easily when COVID hit. I think where the major pivoting had to happen that was new was in our partner class program, which is our outreach programming. The majority of which is for youth, K through 12. So my program director, Florinda Flores Brown, was super busy figuring out how do you pivot outreach programs. Some of our partners couldn't pivot right away with us in the spring. They were overwhelmed. They're in underserved sectors of the city where there's economically disadvantaged students, and it just was a longer process to get going. But we did major thinking in the spring. And one thing we did, which I appreciated, was we reached out to Najim, and they allowed us to repurpose our funds, which were supposed to be for in-class program at the Ella Austin Community Center, and we started a YouTube library of free video writing lessons. And it was like a crash course in our teaching artists to learn how to teach via video. And we were able to also use funding from TCA, Texas Commission on the Arts, once again repurposed, for them to take part in some great training over the summer with the Teaching Artist Project, which is based out of New York City. This is where video and the virtual world suddenly opens up these more seamless connections. So they took these pretty great teaching training sessions over the summer about different ways to use your home environment and to do kind of effective teaching. So the big challenge was, how do you keep kids engaged virtually? So I'll give you a few quick examples. We teach incarcerated youth at the Cindy Cryer Juvenile Treatment Center. We've done that for 20 years. We have 2 seasoned teachers, Jim Lavia Havlin, Erica De La Rosa, passionate, excellent teachers for this program. You can't teach 15 incarcerated youth virtually and have it be effective. So we did a really good job, just like Muddy was talking about, reaching out to our partners at Bexar County. Jocelyn Rice, the program director, was great. And we were like there with our thinking caps, what do we do? So we created like one-on-one or one-on-2 virtual mentorships. So now you have a Jim Lavia Havlin teaching 1 student, maybe 2. And we scaled down the expectations to maybe like 5 to 10 students versus 20, but they've been able to keep going, and we were reaching these incarcerated youth with effective lessons as a result. And then we're in 3 Title I schools in the NEISD, and once again became virtual, and really had to work with the partners to make that effective. I think my teaching artists have been spending more time troubleshooting than usual because unexpected things happen with virtual engagement. But we've come up with like supply bags. You deliver the bags to the school. The kids have something tactile. They have a journal, they have a pen, and the teachers give them very concrete, easy to grasp, but very imaginative writing prompts, and they're just keeping them writing in all these different ways. And we even had a virtual summer camp, believe it or not, at Confluence Park this summer, which was originally nature combined with writing. But we had Andrea Vogab Sanderson and Carol Gonzalez, our teaching artists, like having the kids do a river dance. So they got them moving at home through this virtual class, and then that inspired writing. So it's just like everyone else, like different ways to keep kids engaged and having to kind of adjust accordingly. But we've been able to keep our outreach programming going in most cases through the pandemic as a result.
Are you seeing kids expressing how they are right now? I really would love to know more about what they're experiencing.
Yeah, no, I was asking Florinda about this, and like our Confluence Park series, and this is a shout out to the San Antonio River Foundation, because we really had to work with them to pivot that. Like, who the heck wants to take a nature class via video? Like, you got to think about that one, and like, we sent the kids, this is my idea, my teaching artists came up with this, like they had drone video of the park. So like you send that video to the kids and they're actually seeing the park. And the long and short of that is we got some interesting writing out of that summer camp. I think kids, high performing kids, are very active kids who are used to being able to like go to sports, do music, be out and about, had their wings a bit clipped. And some of these kids were really showing pent-up energy coming out in the writings they did in that summer virtual camp. And we could tell they were processing some complex emotions. And we got some great writing out of it. And we did our first digital zine, which I have to admit, when I saw that zine come through, and this is a shout out to my team, Anissa Nofre is a great marketing director, and she designed it, and Florinda did a lot to make this happen. I was like, this is why I do my job. I mean, they were creating really great stuff about like the rain, the sun. I mean, that's so simplistic, but they came up with really interesting ways of connecting with nature virtually, and you could tell it was keeping them going. But I think youth are feeling isolation. I think, that sense of community is really important for youth, and that creative outlet. I don't have to tell Brandon or Marie about this, like giving kids creative outlet, giving them a voice so they can make sense of this time is really important. And kids, if you give them a little bit of space to be creative and the correct like prompts and ingredients, they'll tell you how they're doing, and they'll come out with ways that you could have never thought of yourself. So I think kids are going through a lot, and I'm just glad Gemini can even play a tiny role in helping them, kind of create stories around it that make some sense to them.
Over at YOSA, the Youth Orchestra of San Antonio, a powerhouse in San Antonio, Brendan Henson, as executive director, I mean, I'm sure y'all had a whole schedule planned out. Y'all knew we had, because y'all think in like, okay, we're going to do this, this, and this, and this. And then suddenly we have a pandemic and there's a shutdown and it's one compromise after another. And the kids, families, everyone has invested in these, in the season. What happens? How did y'all do that?
Yes, well, thank you. When we plan, we're usually on a 18 to 24 month horizon. So we shout out to my team to be able to learn how to plan on a much shorter horizon. When the shutdown happened last year, we had two core programs going on. Our orchestra program, we had more than 500 kids coming to rehearsals once a week and looking forward to concerts coming up in the spring. And of course, we had to basically just shut everything down, in-person activities, and we all learned that you could not hold an ensemble rehearsal on Zoom. It's just impossible for everybody to play together. So we had to come up with some different resources and be able to provide some different engagement for the families. Another kind of core program that we had is our partnerships in schools and some of the programs that we're offering there. And schools were already moving to the virtual aspect, so we were able to slot in very easily with some of the resources that we offer to our schools. And in fact, it probably really helped some of the local music educators to be able to divide their groups up into smaller groups and let some of our coaches kind of help them with sectional coaching. But it was definitely a learning curve to try to be able to reinvent programming quickly and get onto a smaller horizon where we're just planning for 6, 8 weeks, 12 weeks out, which we're still doing at this point too, where we have an eye towards the future, but we know that things can change rapidly in the world that we live in right now.
So I went to your YouTube channel, tons of great videos on your YouTube channel. And I see a lot of performances of the kids together. And how do you do that? I mean, I can see the delay even in this environment. How does that work?
It's pretty complicated. So our music director, Troy Peters, is able to basically get a backing track. So he puts in a score into a music program that creates an audio backing track and a metronome for kids to play along with. So they have little headphones in, they hear that track, they play along with it, they record themselves, and they send it back to us, and then we stitch it all together. And so it's quite a project. We're still working on some projects right now that are finishing up for some concerts this week that we're premiering virtually, but it's very similar. It's a lot of preparation for the kids to be able to play along and then send us their recordings, and then a lot of editing goes into the video and audio aspect of it to get a final performance. We did launch a really cool kind of performance thing last summer called San Antonio Sounds, where we wanted to kind of continue our connection with the community. We did this Classic Albums live concert in the spring where we feature local rock bands to front the orchestra. And so we wanted to kind of keep that kind of connection going too with the San Antonio community. So we connected with a few rock musicians here in town, including Vocab, who did one of our San Antonio Sounds videos with us too. And then the kids recorded their parts and sent it in, and we stitched it all together and had a really cool concept.
And so there's a conductor in the center square, like the Paul Lynde Square, if you have a Hollywood Squares reference there. And are the kids able to see the conductor, or is that something you put in after?
That revealing the curtain here on the magic, it happens after. They
Okay.
don't see the conductor. They're just listening to a click track and a backing track.
Okay, and so, but the audio quality is really good from the performers. So I wonder about, like, their equipment. I mean, that's got to be an investment as well. Not everyone has high quality mics, and so is that a barrier?
Uh, Absolutely, it's a barrier. I mean, we live in a world that it's not as much of a barrier as it would have been 15 or 20 years ago. That a lot of people have these amazing little devices in their pockets, or their parents' phones are able to use. So because of that, the audio and video recording that we quality that we get in is not too bad. I will admit that we want to make sure it's a good product out there, so we spent some time doing some audio editing to make sure that all the levels are kind of sync. The volumes will be different from every video, so we want to kind of equalize those, and be able to make sure that it's a good audio track too before we put it into the video track.
Sure, and so that raises the overall question about the digital divide that we have. Not every kid in every neighborhood is going to have access to high quality internet and a camera and a computer when they need it. The whole family may be sharing the computer, the one computer that the family has. And so, have you seen that to be a problem over at the Blue Star with the kids you have, Madi?
Yeah, we have been witness to that, and we've definitely remained understanding and flexible with our students. In terms of our after school program, not all of our students have access to high-end equipment. Most of them can log on, but you know sometimes there's a lot of noise, or sometimes there's a little bit of disconnection, and so we have to remain understanding. We also offer, an opportunity to check out the equipment that we do have, and we make sure that they know that if they need something, that we will try our best to try and get it to them or accommodate them in some way, because we are used to providing them with resources. This is why we're here. And so our goal is to meet their needs. And same thing with our after school program, or our creative classrooms program. We are working right now in the Harlandale Independent School District, in particular with Wright Elementary. And so we provide them with videos and one-sheet curriculums. And those videos are projects that the teachers do with the small amount of students they have in the school. And at the same time, those videos are made accessible to the students that are learning at home. And so, what I think what we've realized is that, the students at home, sometimes, again, they don't have access to the type of technology that that is required. So we try and keep that in mind when we're creating these projects. They're very short videos, and we provide instruction sheets. And we always work with the school to make sure that if there's something in addition to the video or the sheet that we can provide, that we're doing so. So it takes a lot of flexibility and understanding, and trying to, again, like the other panelists were saying, we're working in a very short time frame, and we understand that a week or 2 weeks from now, we may need to shift our direction, but looking to the future. And so we're always trying to figure out ways to improve that access.
But Madi, contemporary art, uses a lot of materials, whatever your medium might be, not easy to come by for everyone. And then also a studio space is a great place. It just has all that creative energy. And not being able to go to Blue Star, I mean, as contemporary art, one of the maxims is that you're informed by your environment. It's part of the art. And so these kids are not able to enjoy that opportunity inside a professional artist studio. And now they're trying to figure it out. How am I going to do this in the corner of my room that I share with my three brothers?
Absolutely. Yeah. And art is best viewed in person. And this is such a sad thing for us, because we are visual people over here. And we definitely take that in mind. But the good thing about being an artist or being a creative youth is that you're creative, and that you'll find a way to create. And so we talk to our students about carving out a space in the corner of your living room. If you have to work on your kitchen table, artists do that all the time. If you have to go outside and find a piece of cardboard to work on top of, then do that. And it's easier. It's easy for, I think, our young creative people to do. But yes, we do see the impact of them not being in the studio and having access to facilities and materials. In terms of the Creative Classrooms program with the elementary students, we were providing all of these kind of contemporary art type of materials to the schools for the students. And now that they're at home, now that they can't share materials amongst one another, and now that funding is a little bit different in terms of arts education, we are looking to use materials that they can find around the home. So whatever projects we create, we make sure that, you know, they can go outside and pick up some rocks or pick up some sticks, or they use like a little bit of salt from home, or they use like old family photos. So we try to make everything as accessible as possible.
Stephanie, at the San Antonio Area Foundation, why did y'all prioritize cultural vibrancy as a target area? Why do you feel that is the area that, of the four, that's one of them that needs attention?
Well, I mean, we have a long history of supporting arts and culture, and that comes from our donors, right? The funds that we hold. It's important to our donors, and I think that speaks to the centrality of arts and culture in San Antonio. I think that in terms of arts education, that we have studies going back, you know, decades now, really showing the impact that it has on our communities. I spoke a little bit about the impact that it has on individual kids, you know, that even when you're controlling for socioeconomic status, you have greater outcomes in school attendance and college completion. But when we're looking at really having a strong workforce in San Antonio too, what employers are looking for are those collaborative skills, are creative problem solving, and critical thinking. And you get all of that when you're working with a youth orchestra, or when you're figuring out how to get creative with materials. You don't have the materials that you need, so you find what you need. And so when you have that emphasis on access to art and diverse representation of cultures within the arts that you have, then you get that strong workforce where people are getting jobs that are higher paid, with higher opportunities for advancement, and more job satisfaction. And we also know that when people are engaged with art, that reverberates out into the community. So even things like higher rates of volunteerism, even higher voting, are correlated with the strong participation of arts as a child. And I think one of the things that we have seen over the last year is that the impact of the closures and public safety measures have really hurt revenue models for arts organizations. And it had to happen. We had to close doors to keep people safe. And I have seen amazing things. I mean, you've heard just a few of them from our participants today in terms of how they were able to adapt to that. But they can't make up for the revenue models there. And, you know, I think we've lost over 15,000 jobs in San Antonio in the creative sector, and, you know, all the economic activity around that. And we want to sustain that into the future. And one way that you get strong audiences is by making children feel welcome in the arts. When you are welcomed into a museum as a child, when you know what it feels like to pick up a paintbrush or to play an instrument, you are the future museum member, patron, and hopefully artist that will keep a sustained dynamic arts community for San Antonio.
I have a question from a viewer, Marcus, and anyone watching, you can put a question in as well. We'll get it to our panel. Marcus asked, I've seen funding funnel into small business development centers across the nation to help hire small business counselors working through the pandemic. Is there any other kind of support like this out there for arts organizations? Have y'all come in contact with relief from programs? Have y'all been targeted with trying to find a way to help you keep going? So the big fear for me right now is that during this time of the pandemic, we're going to lose organizations, we're going to lose momentum, we will lose interest from people, and then we'll never get it back. So I think that investment now is critical so that we're able to bounce back stronger. But have y'all, are you getting help? Brandon, who's helping you?
Yeah, well, we are very fortunate to receive, of course, help from the San Antonio Area Foundation was amazing. When this all hit, they reached out right away and wanted to make sure that they could do whatever they could to help us. The CARES Act also provided, PPP loan funding. We were the recipient of a large grant from the National Endowment for the Arts, specific for COVID relief funding. And then some of that has funneled down to local city and county governments too, that we were able to apply for funding for that. So the YOSA has received a lot of COVID relief funding. Very fortunate for that. As with most nonprofits, it can be difficult to carve out the time to make those applications and make sure that we are regular reporting and following up with everything that we need to do on our deliverables for those grants. So it can be a stressful. It's another kind of layer of stress of getting some relief funding, but on also making sure that we are following up with our deliverables on that relief funding too. But there has been, I think in San Antonio, there's been a strong support from the community to want to reach out to some of the arts organizations and make sure that funding is there to weather this storm. Now that doesn't mean that it's going to be rosy when we come out of this either. I think it's going to be a long time before we're comfortable getting back to normal. And so the funding issue is going to be something that we're dealing with for several years down the road.
Right. So, Stephanie, San Antonio Area Foundation, you guys are definitely trying to help organizations, particularly now. I mean, you always have been there, but is it now more than ever? Are you identifying need? How is that working?
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned, our focus with the initial round of sort of COVID emergency response funding was for organizations like the ones we have here who are providing resources for families and their kids. But, as this has continued on, there's certain performing arts have been heavily impacted. Museums and galleries are able to stay open, not at the capacity that they were before, but performing arts have really been hit because they relied on those ticket sales and earned revenue. So we continued our funding through the summer with the stability of our annual open application, our annual responsive process, and funded 21 organizations, another $626,000 going out to arts organizations. I want to take a moment to note that those are general operating grants, and certainly this experience or this time has underlined the importance of general operating grants. The Area Foundation is really a leader in best practices in this sense because the organizations had the flexibility to deal with rapidly changing conditions or environments. If they had to apply for a project, by the time they got that grant, that project may not have been possible. They would have had to come back to us and say, well, we can't do this. Can we do it for something else? But we trust them. We know that they are fulfilling their mission. So we say general operating, invested in the people, in the infrastructure, in the technology that you need to do the program and push your mission forward when you need it. And we're really excited to be fundraising now for an arts recovery fund. And that's exactly what you're talking about, is looking at the next 18 to 24 months. Even as our organizations come back, maybe nearing their capacity before, I don't expect they'll be at that same capacity for a while, they're still going to need extra support. And so we're fundraising for an arts recovery fund that will grant out to arts organizations on a quarterly basis once we meet our fundraising threshold, and looking at the next 2 years. And so, focusing on organizations whose revenue models have really been hit in terms of fundraising or admissions on the performing arts, and on those organizations who are centered in and serve the communities, Latino communities and our Black communities in San Antonio and the region that have been most heavily affected by some of the sort of other economic and health outcomes related to COVID.
Yeah, certainly this pandemic has exposed the fragility of many of our systems, particularly when it comes to communities of color. And doing art outreach has taken a beating as well. And so Alexandra Vandekamp at Gemini Inc., we're hearing a lot about the COVID slide, which is happening in education, and kids who aren't able to go to in-person schooling, or they are, or it's just not working out for them. And I know that when they engage in programs like yours, kids, and they see why I go to English class, because I'm learning to write, and now I have a chance to write my story and my family's story, and that pays off so many dividends. Learning to write means learning to think, learning to write, all connected. So are these kids? I mean, you told me you had to scale down. Like how much? And I worry about the kids that got lost in the scale down.
I mean, when I mentioned scale down, I guess realistic expectation for continuing programs. So we have 6 programs going, steadily right now that are all outreach, and we normally have 10. Okay, so I think we did, we focused on the NEISD cluster. That's Camelot Elementary, White Middle School, and Montgomery Elementary. And we began a new partnership, which we were quite excited about, with Bowdoin Elementary on the east side. And then we have our contract with Bexar County. So that, it has us working with incarcerated youth or youth somehow in the system. I mean, realistic expectations. I mean, you don't try to teach 15 incarcerated youth, because then no one has an effective experience. Instead, you go, okay, what is a reasonable way to really engage these kids? And you come up with, one teaching artist teaching 1 or 2 or 3 at a time. Those youth are at the Cindy Cryer Treatment Center. They're not at home and things like that. So we that was the only consistent part of that model, except of course the teacher couldn't go there like they normally would. To us, that was just looking at the problem straight in the face and going, what's going to be effective? So you're right, there is a little loss there, because let's say, we also did kind of what you're talking about, Brandon. We used to have a very long program at the Cindy Cryer Center where it would, go on for 11, 12, 13, 14 weeks. We made instead 2 short cycles of classes, 6 weeks each, and so one teacher does 1 cycle of 6 with a certain group of kids, then the second teacher comes in. So this was all to make sure those we engaged with had an effective, unforgettable experience. So I was thrilled we were able to keep that connection with the teens at this treatment center. But yes, for it to be effective, it was less than what we normally would like to do. There is loss there. I think we're learning so much through this time that, depending on how this continues, we would probably do social distancing and incorporate that only when it was safe and combine it with video classes. So that would allow more youth to take part. But we are doing this kind of, month by month. So I say it's, you find the best balance you can find with the reality you're facing and then delivering your mission. So there are successes there, and then yes, there is some loss. We of course want to be able to do in person as soon as we can. I think one thing that happened is that's kind of a silver lining is we do have some new collaborations we didn't have before. Where I'm sure everyone has their example of that. We work with Writing Workshops Dallas now. And we launched the Big Texas Read, which is a monthly virtual book club. This is an adult program, but kids would be more than welcome to come on. And we're featuring all these diverse Texas authors from all over the state. And they get zoomed into people's living room, kitchen once a month. And I know it's virtual, everybody, and it's not the same as in person, but we've had surprisingly refreshing experiences, because there's the writer like Oscar Casares hanging out in his study. And there's everyone, their cats crawling across their lap. They're having kind of an intimate experience with this author. And I think people that would never have had the confidence to ask a question at a bigger live event, they're sitting there asking a question in the chat or having a talk with the author, and they're thrilled. Okay, so happiness there. I think the one thing is I do feel like the arts as a source for mental health support, as a source for creative outlet as a source for literary community has become, I hope, a little bit more obvious to people. Just to talk about the funding question, Geminic was very fortunate to, one, be supported by the San Antonio Area Foundation, but then the Academy of American Poets and some other national literary arts organizations got together and they talked with the Mellon Foundation, because the literary arts tends to be the least funded of all. And they created a literary arts emergency fund. And we applied for that and we got money that was, as Stephanie was saying, so helpful because it was unrestricted. And I think that's a new advocacy movement that's getting momentum, because these, nonprofit literary arts leaders were like, hey, we gotta represent our sector. So some good conversations have started. Is that going to prevent some short-term loss for the next, in terms of who we reach? Probably not. But my hope is it leads to maybe more kind of a certain new way of thinking about, not new, but a more giving momentum to the importance of arts in our lives that has a long-term impact that helps all artistic sectors.
So how do kids get engaged with what you're doing if they're not in these schools and if they're not incarcerated? How do they come across what they can benefit from Gemini Inc.?
Well, it's through partnerships. For example,
Can they go straight to your website?
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's partner classes is our outreach programming. You just go to our website and you hit that and it tells you all about our classes. We're constantly reaching, and so it's all on the website. And then I think it's just also working through partners or community organizations who we know have youth populations we'd like to work with.
So, but there is opportunities for someone's just hearing about this now and they're saying, wow, this is something that my kid or I would really want to enjoy and benefit from. And over at Blue Star, Madi Hernandez, I know that y'all had like mentorships with artists working with young potential artists, young kids. And I guess that's still happening, continuing, but now it's mainly virtual.
Yes, it's mainly virtual. In the majority of actually all of the programs that we run, we work alongside professional artists that are either on exhibition in our galleries or artist educators that live in the city of San Antonio, that are a part of our artist community. So, a part of our mission not only to support our youth through arts education, but also to support the artists in our community. We are here to help them develop and offer them a job opportunity. And so we always try and look to these artist educators to help us run our programs. For our Mosaic After School program, we are bringing in visiting artists. So for example, Ryan Takaba, who is an exhibiting artist at Blue Star right now, will be coming in and working with our students over a period of a couple of months. Artist Teresa Newsome, who is a photographer here, will also be working with our students. And like Alexandra was saying, this time has given us an opportunity to take on some different partnerships and collaborations. So right now we're working with the University Health System and their AYA cancer program. It's the Adolescent and Young Adult Cancer Program. And we are providing art kits to the cancer patients that are in the care of the University Health System. And so those art kits are designed by professional artists. And once again, we take this art education lens into creating these kits. So on top of creating something and giving them a break from their day, they're also getting access to an arts education. Over the fall, we worked with the San Antonio Food Bank, and we were trying to find ways to further serve our community within our capacity. And we know what a huge the services that the food bank is offering. So we were able to partner with one of their community programs and provide 4,000 sheets of art curriculum to be distributed across the different programs that they have. So like Alexandra said, we've been fortunate enough to grow our programs in that way.
Yeah. I just jump in, Alexandria, kind of talking about what you were talking about a little bit with the loss. I would say, this is a prime example of there's some really great creative youth development programs going on in our community before COVID hit, and then the pivot that we had to make and kind of create some new stuff. Some of that stuff we'll incorporate, right? We'll take with us, and when we come back to the new normal, we'll have some new things in our kit to play with. But the fact that there is going to be some loss, the fact that we can't do the programs the way that we normally do our programs, I think is the biggest case for the importance of having some sustainability and some funding, because when we come out of this, the kids are going to need these programs more than ever. That it's going to be a while before they kind of get back to the development, the status that they needed to be at. And so, I mean, it's amazing. Thank you, Stephanie, and the Area Foundation for advocating for that fund, because the next few years it's going to be, the programs are going to need to expand. They're going to be more needed than ever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I hear that. I mean, we have some silver linings. We have a our YouTube channel suddenly become like something that we're much more focused on than we used to be, which is a happy thing. Our teaching artists have created these great free video writing lessons, and kind of what you were saying, Marie, they're short. They're like 5-6 minutes. And at first they were like, how do we do this? And then it almost spurred on a new phase of creativity. And if I'm having a bad day, I go to YouTube and I listen to one of our own creative writing lessons. And they're doing, it's kind of like lost art taken to another, found art, taken to another level, because they're using everything from home. Like one lesson is like using the spices from your cabinet, find something in your backyard. So that we would have never focused on so much. And as you were saying, Brandon, it will live past now. Like we are always going to be now thinking about that YouTube library. And it's also does a little bit to, deal with that digital divide, because Florinda Flores Brown, my director, was like, okay, not every kid has Wi-Fi at home, but they're more likely to have a cell phone, and YouTube's so easy to see on cell phones. So that was something that was like, if you want to find out about us, you go to our YouTube channel, especially if you're a parent, and you look at those videos. But will that completely solve the kids that we're not able to reach now? No. You know what I mean? It's one thing we created to try to help that. And I can only imagine what it must feel like to be an elementary school kid now, or a middle schooler. So, I think the teaching artists are working 24/7. I'm sure you're going through that. Like it's just constantly pivoting on almost a weekly basis to make sure these classes are as engaging as possible. We have some great partners. We reached out to them, like the site coordinators at these elementary schools have been super helpful, because the kids that go there in person, they're logging in from there, and that site coordinator is happening. And then of course the kid's still at home. Obviously sometimes there's factors at home. If there's a stable home life, that kid's going to maybe be reminded to log in. If not, maybe not. So there's other challenges, even in addition to the digital ones, that are feeding into youth experiences right now.
I think that's what I'm seeing a lot from the organizations they're working with, is that they have started new partnerships, as several of you noted, that you wouldn't have been able to have, or you're getting audiences from other cities, and it's attracting more attention to San Antonio. And I think we only have maybe 10 more minutes, but I wonder if each of you could talk a little bit about the investments that you've been able to make in terms of the capacity of your organization, whether it's training for your staff, or what kind of sort of technological investments you've needed to make, and how you see that as serving you going forward. We'll start with Monty.
Sure. Well, I think that, first of all, shout out to my executive director, Mary Heathcott, because she has been really a true leader within this difficult time, and has ensured that our doors have stayed open and that we're surviving here. And I think that we have been, because we're not able to do as many programs as we have in the past, we have been allowed more time to think a little bit more deeply about the programs that we do have and their impact, and also make the realization that, and I believe Brandon mentioned this earlier, like the work that we're doing now, that these new programs that we're coming up with, we're putting so much work into them that we need to make sure that they stick into the future. So we're looking into the future. We're looking at going back to normal and resuming our regular programming. But now we have this new programming that we have to connect, because we see how it's able to take us farther in who we're serving and who we're reaching. So having the time, as someone that works in the nonprofit that I'm sure all of you are familiar with, we all wear so many different hats and we're constantly busy, but having this time to really critically think about the work we are doing, how to sustain it, how to improve it, how to look to our community has been really valuable. And then also, kind of touching on what the other panelists said about looking into the future and realizing that we need to rely on each other if we're going to survive. And so I know that, there is the CAUSA, which is the organization of nonprofits and creative organizations that have come together to work with each other and to ensure that we all go into the future and we continue to exist and rely on each other. So I think that's going to be a big thing for us, is to look to each other and to collaborate and partner in order to continue.
Yeah. So some of the kind of the things that we're looking at, tools that we've learned, right? The kind of the streaming aspect of being able to hold rehearsals where there's a cohort of kids that are coming in person, and then there's a cohort that's watching the rehearsals online. As we get back to this, especially, kids like to have colds and things like that. So having the opportunity to still participate in a rehearsal, but not actually have to attend, I think is something that we're looking at incorporating moving forward. I think another amazing thing that we have just tampered a little bit into the live streaming of our performances before all of this happened, and now it's going to be what we do moving forward. That we have grandparents of our kids that don't necessarily live in San Antonio and want to be able to see the amazing performance too. So we're going to look at how we can kind of incorporate more technology aspects into our performances as well.
And Alexander, you were able to share a little bit about some of the new platforms you've been on, but is there anything you want to add about sort of the investments you're making into building your capacity going forward?
Sure. Well, we all know Zoom, like a way we didn't know a year ago. I feel like, a lot what we've come through with this is that we have this digital world in our back pocket now. I think the visiting artist concept has been blown open wide. Like, I have like a New York City artist, Zoom into one of our Ed White middle school class. And here's a New York City artist where, don't get me wrong, we want them in person again, but they come in and we don't have to pay for the airfare and the hotel. And so we can do it more. So we have now more of a Texas regional community blooming via Gemini, because like the Rio Grande Valley poets, one of which is our Texas State Poet Laureate, Emmy Perez, taught a workshop this summer. And it was just so much easier to have her do that. And so that is a blessing we will keep moving forward with. And then, of course, bring visiting writers in person, because that's such a beloved experience. And we'd never want to lose that. But the visiting writer model has really become a seamless thing where it can happen so much more now. So the conversations you can have in your classrooms open up quickly because you have a New York City writer coming in maybe, more often. That has been great. I think we did our first virtual gala this fall, and that was an experience. And Brandon, it sounds like you have a great in-house editing team. We're writers over here, and like nobody's good at editing, but she has some video skills, but she's too busy with everything else. We hired a production company, and they were wonderful. I mean, it was the whole thing. Like, everyone's doing videos via their cell phones, sending it in, and then they edit it to make a whole. And we had this virtual extravaganza honoring the wonderful Carrie Clack And there were some things from that we'll keep going. One, a lot more of these like author events are being videotaped than we did before. So we have like a burgeoning video content library happening that is wonderful to see. And I think those training possibilities that my teaching artist took over the summer, that via New York City's Teaching Artist Project, we'll do a lot more of that. So I think there's going to be investment in different kinds of training that can happen all over the country without my artists leaving their homes. You know what I mean? So we'll continue looking into that.
So I do want to thank all of our guests for joining us this afternoon to help us understand how the local community dealing with art education with youth, preparing them for the future during this pandemic. I want to thank all of you for tuning in to this vital conversation. This is the final one in our series with the San Antonio Area Foundation for Impact Areas, Livable, Resilient Communities, Youth Success, Successful Aging, and Cultural Vibrancy. If you missed any of our previous conversations, you can visit tpr.org today and check out the entire series. These vital conversations were made possible by the John L. Santikos Charitable Foundation, a fund of the San Antonio Area Foundation. I want to thank you again. I'm David Martin Davies, Texas Public Radio.